Hello again, and welcome to RP-0 America. So our previous craft is on the way to Jupiter. It's somewhere. Not sure where it is actually in terms of space. It's probably that yellow-gray line. I've got a mid-course correction set for it, and I've got the next craft ready to go. Oh, there. Yeah, that's probably it. Yep. Ranger 4 Oak. I'll probably end up changing the name since it no longer has the launch vehicle. Come on. There we go. Whoa. That's just impressive. First time I discovered you could zoom in ridiculously far like that was amusing. But yeah, here we go. Pretty Earth as I've got. You can even see the aurora and such, and we are ready to launch. So we're in the plane of the moon. So this is a little bigger of a launch vehicle than the other one, but pretty similar. It has just a bit of I just threw an additional bit of tank on it because I've got stronger engines. Just wanted to, in case the previous vehicle didn't have enough delta V, I knew that I had other engines unlocked so that I could still carry out the mission with this one. But it looks like the other one was able to get to Jupiter, so this one will have a little bit of extra delta V left over for whatever. And I'm pretty sure I built a bigger probe. As you can see, it's got a bigger fairing as well. So without further ado, light the engines and let's take off. Yeah, it's just a little bit, the probe is a bit bigger. I've got more delta V in the probe. So I believe there's less delta V in these two upper stages. Probably in this one as well, but... Oh, and yeah, and the sun is high in the sky again, it looks like, when we're in the plane of the moon, so no reflection on the ground, no reflection on the water of the sun. So you can only see a little bit of the water effects. And plenty of frame rate hit from that, and we turn over here, we gain a good bit. Alright, and let's start pitching over. So it's a pretty similar launcher. This is, I think, like pretty much the biggest Atlas that I would ever be building. And it's got a pretty good bit of throw. I mean, if you can throw really any probe towards Jupiter, it's a pretty substantial launcher. So I could see myself using this for other things in the future, this launcher. Should probably pitch over a bit more. It just kind of wobbles a bit, and I would expect this launcher to actually be a bit even less stable than the previous one was because of the very large fairing. Oh yeah, I think I must have maybe thrown on some bigger solar panels. I don't recall. It will be. I designed the probe in there a while ago, so it'll be almost as much of a surprise to me when I see it as it will be to you. It looks like we're past max Q. The rocket keeps trying to kill itself. Don't know why. But I'm doing a little bit of manual control to keep it away, because 2 degrees down from that surface prograde shouldn't be very far down, but it does keep trying to go. I think it might be because it's got the verniers. The vernier engines just behave a bit stranger. It looks like we're passing through a cloud layer, judging by the way everything changed. It's a lot cloudier of a day than on the previous launch, so that might be why we've got a little lower frame rate. Okay, and we're way past max Q now, so I should be able to safely pitch down even more. I don't know, I might try volumetric clouds again, but when there's multiple cloud layers, it definitely takes a hit on the frame rate, so I might power it down to just 2 cloud layers instead of 3, and then see if I can throw in volumetric clouds and still get a decent frame rate. Moving pretty fast. Alright. The resistance from the atmosphere is pretty much all gone away, so I can move even closer to the orbital prograde instead of the surface prograde. And this time it looks like no engines have failed. Let's see, core engine. Yeah, a third of a unit of thrust, 310. A whole unit, and yeah, so the core engine is substantially more efficient, even though they're burning the same fuel. That's because of the nozzle design. And when you're throwing a lighter upper stage, it makes sense to cut off and just to throw away the booster engines a lot earlier. But because the second stage of this vehicle is so large, the Centaur, for an Atlas, it is a very large upper stage. You don't throw away the boosters until fairly late in the game, around now or so, maybe even later, but so you get a shorter trip to orbit if you throw them away a little later. Like, yeah, should be good. Alright, so drop those, and we still have one, 1g of acceleration. And that's just, again, that's less weight you have to carry, because those engines are not burnable mass, and so if you throw them away, then there's less of this stage that has to make it to be brought to the velocity at which this stage burns out. All right, and we are high enough to drop the fairings. A fairly gentle passage away. Yeah, probably. I probably could have dropped that extra set of engines a little later, but I'm okay holding on to it. I'm fine with what I've done here. So I've gone to a substantial time warp, and what was it, 168 kilometers or so? Somewhere, like I said in the previous video, somewhere around that point, 160 some kilometers, there's some kind of transition. I'll keep an eye out for it this time. Just the frame rate goes up substantially, I find. Well, it seems like we passed through that already. I didn't see any visual changes. It might just be maybe the PQS mode disabling, and so it just saves a lot of kind of code that has to run. Okay, and that stage will burn out. There we go. So yeah, as you can see, this probe is a lot bigger than the previous one we were throwing. It's got a whole new core. It's got the Ranger Block 3 core. But we are still using we basically made it a bigger probe, but we're pretty much using the same strategy as we used with that previous craft. Okay, let's just pitch to, whoa, I guess I didn't lock it. All right, let's pitch to 5 degrees and see how that goes. Actually, I'll pitch up a bit more. Since we're not lobbing quite as high as we did on the previous one, we aren't very far away from Apo. So let's go to 15, sure. So again, I've done the same thing with this probe as I did with the previous one, where I've got the tanks locked. Yeah, I've got a different antenna on this one. I've thrown on way bigger solar panels. Because Jupiter's so far out, the previous design might not actually have enough power once it gets out to Jupiter, but I don't know. Oh yeah, and I threw on some biosample. I don't know, I don't really know exactly what that would mean in the context of Jupiter, but it's another experiment to throw. If I can throw a bit more mass at Jupiter, I may as well throw more science on. That's what I was thinking. Okay, so there we go. So this is decreasing a lot slower now that I've got this higher pitch. Let's pitch down a little bit, because that is also pushing the apoapsis higher. So now let's just let it make it to apoapsis, and then we'll kind of change our pitch again. Yeah, the Centaur with 2 engines has, compared to modern Centaurs, I believe this is a smaller, or like there's a couple different versions of the American upper stage that use the RL-10. The Delta launch vehicle and the Atlas, I believe, have different versions of it. I'll have to research that, because I read everything and then forget all the details after a few months later. But I believe they've got different designs, different diameters, especially. This is a relatively small Centaur by modern standards, and so with 2 engines on it, it can get to a pretty substantial thrust-to-weight ratio. Like, what is it, the DCSS? Delta Core. Actually, I don't know what the SS stands for. I think it's called the DCSS, the upper stage for the Delta rocket. There's a 4-meter variant and a 5-meter variant. Or at least there were. I don't know if they still fly them. I'm not nearly as well versed in modern rockets, other than, of course, the Falcons. Everybody knows the SpaceX rockets, because they really don't fly variants. They don't fly variants at all, now that I think about it. Like, they have evolved the design a few times, but there aren't variants with different upper stages or variants with solid rocket boosters or anything. It's a pretty straightforward design to remember. Whereas the Atlas and the Delta rockets, they fly, the modern versions fly with various numbers of solid rockets on rocket boosters on them. Yeah, for instance, the Atlas V that launched recently with OSIRIS-REx just had one of these engines on it, and so I believe it has a bigger tank than this would of fuel, and so it burned for quite a long time with a very low thrust-weight ratio, particularly when compared to a vehicle like this one. But the advantage of that, just like when I drop those booster engines, is if you just have one engine, even though you have a lower thrust-weight ratio, it's less non-burnable mass, right? An engine may give you thrust, but it also is something you can't burn. And so the less dry mass you have at stage burnout, the more delta V you can deliver with that stage. Time to APO is still climbing, so let's pitch down a bit more. And pitch down even more. Looks like it's still moving out. All right, 12 seconds and holding pretty substantial thrust-weight ratio. See, with this probe that's so much heavier than the previous one, the Centaur wouldn't even have enough delta V to throw this at the moon, let alone to Jupiter. So it has, we've still got this solid here to as kind of a booster, a kick motor to throw it from kind of an extraplanetary speed all the way up to a speed where you can get all the way out to Jupiter, or say like down to Mercury. I didn't check to see how hard I would have to throw something. Oh, not terribly differently. 5 kilometers per second to Mercury, 6.3 to Jupiter. Oh, and it looks like we have achieved orbit. All right. Yeah, so we don't have enough delta V left in the Centaur in order to reach even the moon. But with all three different, we've got Centaur fuel left, we've got that solid kick motor, and we've got delta V in the probe itself as well, some of which will probably end up getting used. So let's see, maneuver planner. So let's put that together. Weird changing modes. Oh, I didn't mean to do that. Okay, so let's zoom out. Let's point at Jupiter again. So I waited a few days or I intended to at least. Yeah, Jupiter. Yeah, I waited a bit until we were kind of within a day of that launch. Jupiter set as target. So there's a bit of a difference between these two probes. They should at least, there's a chance that they'll reach Jupiter ASAP. So 2 days is an option, so that's 6,400 if I go ASAP. It's not very much of a difference at all. If it was, though, like I can't wait 2 days in orbit with this, which is why, other than for this ejection stage, I really don't like to use hydrolocks, because you have to use much more fancy and like later tech tanks to hold on to hydrogen for longer than just a few orbits or maybe a day. Duration 2 days, or sorry, departure, so let's go with just ASAP, create the node. All right, so in 35 minutes we'll have that burn. Okay. So pretty similar to the previous mission in terms of the steps, but despite that, it is quite a different probe. It is a much larger and heavier probe, as you can see. Okay, so we are approaching that window, so let me do the quick math. Yep, 2.5 minutes, so a little more than a minute before the node I want to queue that up for. And probably start pointing myself in that direction pretty quick. Okay, there you go, and you can see the lovely nighttime sky. Sorry, if the probe was a bit, whoa, I must have clicked funny there. Center U, yeah, it's a bit better lit now. Turned on, crank this up. Let's crank it up just a little more so it's more easily visible on the video. But it is on the dark side of the Earth, or over the nighttime side. All right, so let's point. So that'll start arcing us in the right direction, and then I'll just kind of take care of slowing down onto that point myself. All right, we are about 30 seconds away from the burn. Of course, any real space program would probably do this, at least a minute earlier in advance than I'm doing this, and with greater precision. Let's see, 2.5 minutes. Yeah, I suppose once I've got this pointed, that will be good enough, and I'll make sure the fuel is stable. Although I think MechJeb is more aware and gentle with that now. If the fuel isn't stable, I don't know if it'll let you throttle up and just throw away the ignition. which is awesome. I'm not perfectly certain of that, and I also use like the dev version of MechJeb, shows the build number, so I can test out those new features and see how it evolves. All right, so it looks like we're close enough. So throttle up, come on, throttle up and point it more precisely at node. Looks like both engines are good. And this version of the engine, oh, do I have the wrong variant? 433, oh no, maybe I just have. I'm just not sure what about the dash one, but that looks like it's a decent, decent specific impulse. It's okay. Yeah, soon, once I unlock, I've got I've currently around the tech node, which unlocks the F1 engine. And in addition to that, I'm near the tech node. The next thing it's unlocking will give me the J1 engine as well as later versions of the RL10, so I look forward to that. Those are heavy hitter tech nodes, that's for sure. All right, let's just warp a little bit. And so I'll have a chance to develop the F1 engine and develop the J2 engine. I'll look into designing some non-canonical, non-American historical launch vehicles, particularly with like the F1. I know that I'm going to be developing a development vehicle, so I can get some launches in. Try to think of creative missions where I can increase the reliability by using the F1 engine rather than just hiring a research team. So let's spin this up a bit while we're pointed, and that burns out. And right away we want to fire off the solid. Yeah, just the probe element of it, I think, because same solid, everything. I think this is maybe the probe itself is what, 300 kilos or more than the previous version was, which is a pretty substantial increase, considering we have to throw it through so much velocity change to get it fired at Jupiter. So this solid is going to deliver most of. Whew, I love that camera change. I'm sure that compresses very well on YouTube. All right. I think that's the sign that we are leaving the local system, leaving behind the Earth and the Moon. All right, and this stage is nearly burned out. It has a really high G-force. These solids, they're just they're great. They're great kick motors for things like this. I'm trying to remember there was I think it was a 2-stage solid fueled motor. Okay. That was used on the shuttle, which is really neat to me. Oh, yeah, that's true. We wanna burn forward, and let's also see if we can kill the spin. Okay, so we're spinning slow enough that I can actually see so I'm pretty sure I'm firing in the correct direction to kill spin. Yep. Oh yeah, we've got a really low thrust away ratio. Oh, no, I know what I'm doing wrong. Unless I've got this with the wrong fuel. There we go. Point at node. I wonder how MechJeb will do that. Hopefully it doesn't screw it up. But thankfully I don't have like a limited number of ignitions. But yeah, I've got this main engine and it's working nicely. How is it for data? Oh, this is like the first time I'm using it. Ooh. Oh, that's not that's not ideal at all. Oops, I'm trying to manually do this and I'm screwing it up more. Come on, kill that spin. Just a lot. It's got a lot of weight in the solar panels and the arms and stuff, I imagine. So that makes it a bit more difficult to spin it, to de-spin it. Like I've said previously, in reality you'd use small weights on wires that are then kind of just jettisoned from the craft, so that if you want to get rid of the spin, rather than having to spend a bunch of expensive fuel you brought along, you just jettison these masses. Everything's perfectly calibrated such that they effectively absorb your angular momentum, and you just throw them off. Called a yo-yo de-spin. If you haven't heard me mention that before, or haven't heard of the tech, I encourage you to look it up. It's really cool. And so this probe is just so big, and so much of it is fuel, that, interesting why. So that has spent a little bit of fuel. I won't pull out the satellite dish just yet, because even though I looked at it in the VAB, and I don't think it changes the center of mass to open it up, even though it visually looks like it should, I'm not going to risk that. because I don't need to. Anyway, yeah, I've got way bigger solar panels on this. It's just a lot bigger of a probe. You can do a lot more with it. So I look forward to using this as this design as a base for larger probes and missions to other planets. Makes me think of, is it Viking? I'll have to look. I think so. Here, let me Google it. Viking Mars mission. There's a mission where they sent an orbiter to Mars. Viking 1-2. Let's just go to images. It's Carl Sagan next to the lander, so maybe that's not the mission I'm thinking of. Mariner? No, there are missions where. Oh yeah, there we go. Wiki Viking 1. Yeah, it's just this big bus. It's this big bus. It's got a big fuel reserve and an engine. Yeah, it looks remarkably like this actually, and they used it to to put basically this put itself into orbit of Mars, and it also brought along a Mars lander. Looks this bus design is vaguely similar to the Viking 1. Alright, so let's just time warp a bit more to complete this. So it's not going to be perfect, obviously. I probably could have started the burn longer because I didn't have a good estimation of how long this part of the burn would take. So I probably should have centered the burn more around this part of it as well. Alright, so let's go take a look at Jupiter. For some reason it won't let me click on Jupiter, but if I tab through the planets, Mercury, Venus, tab, 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 there we go. It gets us to Jupiter. So you can see we're coming out slowly but surely. And we've just got oodles, we've got tons of delta V in this. Probably not enough to get an orbit around Jupiter, but maybe enough to do like a substantial mid-course correction, or like to change our orbit enough that perhaps we can actually get a closer flyby to one of the moons. I was going to say one of the planets of Jupiter. Jupiter's so big that the moons are almost as big as some planets. All right. Okay, we're burning most of the fuel in this, but not necessarily most of the delta V, because the half of the fuel left over has to push less. It doesn't have to push the half of the fuel that was burned, and as a result, still got a lot of delta V left in this vehicle. Even once we approach this, okay, let's point a little better. Let's just point. Sure, let's point prograde. Let's turn that off, and then soon we should see an intercept. And this was, a bit bigger of a probe than that previous launcher was capable of throwing. Oh, it's twitching. It's twitching. Around Jupiter, I'm seeing something. Oh, whoa, it zoomed in way too close and quick. All right, so let's just use the RCS. See, I've got the RCS and the main engine using the same type of fuel, so now I can... it's got a pretty good thrust-to-weight ratio, just the RCS alone. Alright, and let's call that good enough. And so I'll have to set up a mid-course correction for this as well. So I set one up for the other one that gets it closer to the plane of Jupiter. Like, it's going to be all twitchy, but I think I might be able to... no, I can't. Maybe it's just because we're still in the sphere of influence of the Earth. But at some point I'll be setting a mid-course correction so that we come in closer to the plane of the moons, although we're relatively close right now, not terribly bad. It'll probably cost me like a dozen meters per second or so. I'll do it in like a month or two, somewhere around this, and then set up just like here. I've got the Ranger 4 mid-course correction. Oh yeah, so what is this craft called again? I remember being so amazing after all. Whoa, interesting. Here, let me zoom in. Oh cool, apparently a biosample container is full of purple tubes. Neat. Okay, so what is this probe called? Oh yeah, and I can open this up now. Extend. Yeah, so I can have what looks potentially like a legitimate antenna on this thing. Range, safety, rename vessel. Alright, so this is Ranger 5, which thankfully the name actually makes sense compared to the previous one. So now that we're no longer... So Great Oak was the name of the launch vehicle, basically the larger version of the Atlas. Accept, and we'll rename it since it's no longer connected to that. And I'll need to set up a maneuver node in order to do the course correction. So I will end this video just in a moment. Let's go to the free cam, or there we go, free cam, and we will end the video moving away from Earth. towards Jupiter. And then, so in the future, I've unlocked the F1 engine. I'm moving towards unlocking the J2 engine, so we can make much larger vehicles, which will allow us to do cool things in low Earth orbit on our way to getting people in orbit of the moon and to the surface of the moon. Because so far we have done a flyby of the moon with people and a return to Earth, but not actually orbit of a moon even, let alone a landing. And we'll be developing the technology and hardware that leads to that, so that's going to be fun. Oh, thanks for watching RP-0 America. Goodbye.